Hi, Courtney and everybody. My name is Ashley Cash, and I lead our operations and people-focused teams and support our new school creation and charter work here at Good Reason Houston. We're a nonprofit focused on increasing the number of students learning in great public schools. And charter schools are, of course, public schools, which sometimes folks don't always realize. So we work with a number of large and small charter networks and individual school sites to open or expand high quality school choices and options for students and families across Houston. One of our school partners is Bloom Academy, and today I'm joined by their founder and superintendent, Courtney Sales. Thanks for participating, Courtney. We're so excited to talk with you.
Absolutely. I'm so honored. Thanks for choosing me.
Of course. We are celebrating Women's History Month, and all month we're spotlighting women who are leading education efforts in and around Houston to find out more about their journey, what advice they have for other women, young women in the education fields as they're sort of navigating the complexities of the education space. So I have some questions for you, and I'll just jump right in if that works for you.
Absolutely. Sure.
Okay, so first question, what are you most proud of in your professional career? We don't always start with that one, and we don't always take a minute to acknowledge moments of pride, but we would love to hear that.
What am I most proud of in my professional career? I would certainly say my trajectory towards building Bloom. So my background is I'm Afro-Latina, I'm Puerto Rican and Black. I'm originally from the Bronx. Grew up in a single parent household, lots of different challenges growing up that made my childhood sort of pretty difficult. So we've experienced homelessness. And when I say we, my siblings and I, we've experienced homelessness, we've experienced food insecurity. But one thing that always remained constant or important to my mom was that we received a high quality education. So after attending Penn State undergrad, I applied to both Teach for America and law school and got into both, but was really compelled to give back to my community. So I chose Teach for America and was fortunate enough to be placed around 7 blocks away from where I grew up. And right in my neighborhood, it was in the second lowest performing schools in New York State at the time, and had really great gains and outcomes with my students, but got a lot of insight into sort of the intricacies of the school to prison pipeline. And that was the impetus for me then going to law school. So while in law school, focused on all things child advocacy. So children aging out of foster care, child abuse and neglect proceedings, school to prison pipeline issues, and then sat to become a public defender and was able to represent adults first, but then later on, ultimately represent children in their criminal proceedings. So after having been on both ends of the school to prison pipeline, recognizing that a lot of my clients couldn't read, so I couldn't explain, a plea deal to them, or a lot of my clients had IEPs, but those sort of things aren't admissible in court when we're making lifelong, decisions about what happens to a child. I was sort of frustrated by the system and decided to start Bloom Academy. So I would say that's definitely my proudest accomplishment, recognizing a problem, but being 10,000% committed to the solution. So we opened up Bloom Academy in 2019 and started off very humble beginnings with 37 students, but now have 200 students on a 16-acre plot of land. So we only intend on getting bigger and better. And our students love our school. We genuinely love our students and our families. And we'll see. We'll see. There's more to come. We're still building.
Yeah. Wow. That's I appreciate you sharing that. That's certainly something to be extremely proud of. Did you find, Courtney, as you were, you have a sort of unique trajectory in being a public defender and then deciding to step into the education space. Did you find that there were particular obstacles that you faced as a woman, whether on sort of the legal path or in education specifically? And I'd be curious how you work to kind of overcome them or manage them.
So I served as a public defender in Pittsburgh, which is a very binary city. It's Black and white, anything in between is just other. So as a woman of color and a young woman of color at that time, I may have been like 28, 27, 28 when I became an attorney, or even sitting in this role as one of the youngest Afro-Latina superintendents in Texas. I would say one of the biggest challenges and obstacles is certainly people believing what I say, and sort of the same deference that I would say is oftentimes given to men when they open up their mouths to suggest something or to analyze something or to strategize around something isn't necessarily always given to me.
Mm,
And so that's certainly a challenge for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Have you developed tools or, ways you navigate that? Or what does that look like as you're whether in those moments or when you look back on those moments? I'd be curious what advice you might have for other women out there who are facing the same sorts of things.
I would just say be confident in yourself.
Mm,
Know that it's okay not to have all the answers. It is okay to be the boss or, a leader and step into a room and not have all the answers. Ask lots of questions. I think in moments where people people sort of question either your intelligence or a plan or a strategy, just, to take a deep breath and recognize that the way that people show up and the way that people emote is outside of your locus of control. To keep your eyes on the prize, understand exactly what your mission and vision is and why you have a seat at the table, and know that you belong there.
I love that. You have a seat at the table and you belong there. Sometimes in navigating those relationships or those obstacles, mentorship is really valuable. Having somebody else you can call on, speak to, lean on. Do you find that to be useful in your life, whether personally or professionally? Do you have a female mentor in particular? And would be curious if so, how they might have helped you get where you are today.
Sure. So I have a village of phenomenal women who all have their very unique and special stories and sort of skill sets. One of the most notable, however, is my grandmother, and she recently passed away.
Sorry to hear
She
that.
was she was 81. She passed away this summer, and she has always been my rock. And she has a pretty phenomenal story herself. So, like I mentioned earlier, I'm from the Bronx. She's from the Bronx. She was one of the first female captains of corrections at Rikers Island, and she was a lifelong civil rights activist. So she actually, it was pretty neat to see Al Sharpton showed up to her funeral to speak and say some awesome words about her. She was my person, and she provided insight and wisdom that I know that I won't ever get from any place else. But and I have really big shoes to fill, but she was my light, and I will continue to sort of, lead her legacy and keep the things that she told me very near and dear to my heart. My mom is an awesome person. I have a sister, I have best friends who are also in education. On the professional front, I know that you're also interviewing Miss Kaylee Columbero. So she's also one of my very good friends. Just, like, it's important for me to have, I think a difference of opinion is always great, right? Like, and I celebrate differences of opinion, but I think in this work especially, it's important to have philosophically aligned partners in this work. So if your goal is to ensure that, like my goal is, right, to ensure that every single Black and brown student in my school gets a high quality education, then I need to align myself with other people that feel just the same way. And so that's what I do. I
Yeah.
respect everyone's opinions, but in terms of like mentorship, we have to be 100% aligned.
Yeah. Do you, as you're sharing that, I'm just curious, when you have a village and different, do you use different folks in different ways? Or, sometimes the idea of mentorship is appealing and folks are like, okay, I need a mentor, but how you lean on those folks or how you actually use that sometimes is hard to wrap your head around. So do
Mhm.
you have any advice, or just are you willing to share, do you just pick up the phone and, share what's going on in your life and have just space? Do you come with a particular problem you're trying to solve? Just in a real practical way, what could that look like, or what has that looked like for you?
Think on the professional tip, it's certainly like I have a problem to solve. So, um, for instance, one of my near and dear school leaders in Memphis, Tennessee, she's also a founding superintendent. Her name is Lakina Booker. We have weekly calls on Sundays where we have a problem of practice and we sort of grapple with it. And there's other times where like mentorship just looks like sitting on the phone silently as we work on, you know, I don't know, strategic plans around summer school, right? And then we come off mute to ask different questions. It doesn't always have to be this sort of like pretty package, right? Like you don't need to have an agenda. Leadership is really lonely. So wherever I fit in and can get in, I certainly do.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be really helpful, that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfectly packaged. You just need those people you can pick up the phone or get up. Yeah.
I'm like a color coded type A, let's have an agenda type person, but there's some days where I'm just like, boop, boop, boop. I need help thinking through this problem. I don't have an agenda. Let's just help me figure this out, please.
Yeah. And I find too, just saying it out loud sometimes, like you can develop your own solutions. You just needed kind of a mirror or a sounding board or, somebody else that just allowed you to have some space to talk through it and navigate.
It feels less lonely too, because there were things that I mentioned her and Kaylee, and they're like, oh, I've been through that already, right? And Kaylee is a year or two ahead of me in her progression. So I don't have to have the answers for everything. Like I said earlier, right? Like I just don't need to have the answers for everything. There are other people that are willing to help me figure that out. But delegating and asking for help was certainly something that took time for me to come to terms with.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point too you just made around having different mentors or different folks in your space at different times, like across the life spectrum. So Kaylee's a couple years ahead of you. There might be somebody right where you are. There's your grandmother who is had decades of experience and life experience, professional experiences, all of those things. So yeah, it takes a village, to your earlier point.
It does.
What advice now would you have for a young woman in education who aspires to lead in particular? Or what, maybe another way to ask that is, what might you have told your younger self at the beginning of your career journey, knowing where you wanted to get and where you are now?
To my earlier point, you deserve a seat at the table, even if you don't have the answers. I think that imposter syndrome is real. It took me a while to figure out sort of what a CEO / superintendent is. I never had any formal training in that regard. But it's worked out to me, I would say, to date, because I'm very, very mission aligned. I have a very clear vision of what I believe and the community believes education should look like for Black and brown children in our community. So I would say definitely just know that you belong at the table. It is okay to make mistakes. It is okay to ask questions, and it is okay not to have all the answers. I would say what I would say to my younger self is certainly, especially as a woman of color and a young woman of color, that it is okay to be your authentic self. And in fact, you should be your authentic self. The risk that you run of trying to be somebody else or trying to emulate another leader is that it can cause a dissonance in you that like doesn't make sense and will only impede what you're doing, if that makes sense. Like if your jam is listening to Drake every day on the way to school, that's okay. If it's Bon Jovi, that's okay. If you have a Bronx accent, that's okay. I think, especially in leadership roles, people will only follow you if you are authentic. If you're phony, you can only get so far before people figure it out, right? So it's okay to be your authentic self, whatever that is. Be kind always, be respectful always, but certainly always be you.
Yeah. That authenticity, if we can all show up that way, we're going to change, the fact that we even need to feel like we need to operate differently, like that needs to go away over time. And it's only going to happen if we're showing up as we are. Yeah.
Hoop earrings. You have on hoop earrings today. Shout out to you. Big curly hair, Alabama accent, like whatever it is, just be you.
Yeah, I got my curls in a little bunch.
See that. Top knot.
So I've got one more question for you, which is just why do we need, and I think we're getting there even in this conversation, this last 30 seconds we just had, but why do we need more women in education, in leadership roles? I think education is interesting because when we think about teachers, we think female oftentimes in society. And so folks don't always realize that a lot of senior leadership are pretty male dominant and pretty white male dominant. And so just why do we need more women of color in particular in leadership roles? What do women bring to the space that is unique? Just anything along that line of questioning.
I think diversity of ideas, clarity, empathy, um, a keen ability to strategize around things and problem solve. I don't want to knock men. That's not what this is about. It is Women's History Month, but I just think that, yeah, I mean, certainly all those things, just a clear sense of vision, a clear vision. Hmm,
Yeah, I mean, I think that,
yeah, I think that sums it up for sure.
yeah, bringing it back, have a seat at the table, be your authentic self, and well,
And and know that you don't have to have all the answers. I want to continue to say that. I think
love that you're bringing that up. Yeah.
like so many people, not just women, but people are deterred from applying to certain positions because they feel like they need to reach a certain place and have all these degrees. And I myself have even fallen into that. Like my resume just isn't strong enough for this yet, but just like take a leap. If you're in education for the right reasons, if you really truly want to impact your community, if you want to make the world a better place, you don't need to have all these qualifications. You need to be authentic. You need to have a plan. And there's lots that you'll learn along the way. There's still vets 20 years in the game that don't know it all. COVID hit. No one had the answers for that, right? There was nothing that you could have had on your resume to make you prepared to step into that position. So just have the confidence and go for it.
Yeah. Courtney, I guess to that point, I know I said it in my last question, but you shared why you made the decision to enter the education space. But to this point about, I mean, you didn't know what it would look like or mean to be a school founder and to be a superintendent. I mean, what conversation did you have with yourself? Or was there a single moment or a series of moments for you to say, you know what, I don't have some of the formal training. I don't, I did not anticipate doing this, but I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to claim my seat at the table. I'm going to occupy this space because XYZ deserves it and needs it. Like, what got you there?
I had the opportunity to work at in a central office at a pretty large school district, and as a project manager for professional development. And so I did have the opportunity to sit at the table with the superintendent, the deputy superintendents, and sort of like the main directors and assistant superintendents in central office. And I recognized that they didn't have all the answers, right? Like I was able to meaningfully, contribute to the conversation, to come up with strategies and solutions, to come up with plans. And at that point, I had only been an attorney maybe for like 2-3 years. And so having that opportunity, and that actually is a good point, because my suggestion would be to, while you don't need formal training necessarily for these things, definitely partner with people who are doing the things that you want to do, right? To the extent you can set up informational interviews. And I would love that. I would never shy away from anyone shadowing me for a day or ask me questions. In fact, lots of people from all over the United States ask me what it takes to start a school. And I'm always happy to have the conversation, even if it's just 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
It is a crazy process, so I can't in good conscience tell people, oh yeah, become a founder, start a school, unless they have the support they need to be able to do that. But I think that, creating partnerships, friendships, professional relationships with people that are in the seat is really important as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Courtney. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer my questions. Your responses are certainly going to hopefully inspire, empower, lend some voice to the concerns and fears that other women have who are looking to get into the education sector or are currently in it, and looking to forge their own path. And you are doing incredibly challenging work, and the city of Houston is better for it. So thank you. I know we'll be seeing and hearing so much more from you, and you'll be motivating an entire generation of young women out there. So
the hope. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.